All right, today we're going to talk about Standard 645, the Peloponnesian Wars. As a recap, raise your hand if you know which two city-states fought against the Persians. We know that. Sparta and Athens. Raise your hand if you know who won, the Greeks or the Persians. Right, the Greeks. Raise your hand if you know which city-state became powerful after that. Right, is Athens. They wanted to be a world power. Do you remember when we talked at the very end that Athens basically formed a team up with all these Greek city-states called the Delinean League? And what that meant is they're going to unite together for mutual defense. Now, pay attention to that. You will hear that idea again in 8th grade. Our original 13 colonies united together for defense, and it became the United States. So basically, that's what the Delinean League was the United City-States of Greece in case the Persians ever came back. Except, raise your hand if you know who wouldn't join. Right, Sparta wouldn't join. And so what happened is you have all these city-states that are going to start paying Athens to lead this Delinean League. And Athens doesn't necessarily use all that money to lead everybody. They're going to rebuild Athens and make it into something fantastic, which we'll talk about next week during the golden age of Athens. But there's one city-state that does not like this, and that's Sparta. We should know that. So it's going to take place around 30 years. Around 30 years, this war is going to take. Imagine a 30-year war. It's going to take a long time. All right, so go ahead and answer these questions. You got about 1 minute to answer these questions. Look how far back we went. We went all the way back to the beginning of the year. See if you can answer these questions. You got about 1 minute. You need yours? No, you don't go. Where's your notes? Do you know? Hand up. Don't. You know where your notes? Good. I'm going to look in this stack. This is the stack of paper that people wrote on. I left in my class. Raise your hand if you know what nomadic means. Raise your hand if you don't, be honest. Okay. Nomadic means no permanent home. They traveled, raise your hand if you know what they traveled with. Traveled with the food, right? What does domestication mean? Raise your hand if you know what that means. Raise your hand if you don't know what it means. Domestication means controlling plants and animals. You're going to control where they are and how much of them there are. Raise your hand if you know what irrigation means. Yeah, we all know that means controlling water. Raise your hand if you know what metallurgy means. Raise your hand if you don't. Metallurgy means forming or making metal tools. What did the Paleolithic and Neolithic man use for tools? Raise your hand if you know that, right? Stone, bone, antler, ivory, wood, and then at the end they started using copper. Next. So head scratcher. Go ahead and answer this. You got 1 minute. Why was the war between Athens and Sparta inevitable? Why was it destined to happen? Raise your hand if you think you know why the war was destined to happen. It was destined to happen because they were so different. Athens wanted to be a world power. They wanted to expand. They wanted to be in control or in charge of everything. They wanted to influence people. And we all know what Sparta wanted. Sparta wanted to be left alone. And they did not think that was going to happen. And they worried because the Athenians will start to bully around these other city-states. They're going to worry that they're going to come for us. So you might as well attack them first. Okay, next. Essential question. How does war affect an area? That's easy. Raise your hand if you have an opinion on this. I haven't asked the question. You can't raise your hand yet. I gotta ask the question. Do you think that a long war will always benefit one side? Will it benefit both sides? Or will it negatively impact both sides? So raise your hand. 1, will it benefit one? 2, will it benefit both? Or 3, will it negatively affect both? Right, it will negatively affect both. Now, this is kind of a predictor of what we're going to talk about later, toward the very end. A long war between two powerful enemies will negatively impact both. Loss of money, war costs a lot of money. Loss of manpower, you're killing all your young men. Loss of prestige, and you're just going to get worn out. And so what you're going to see at the end, what happens when both the superpowers have a long war, no matter who wins? They're both going to be weakened. And what can that lead to? So keep your brain on that. Keep your brain on that. Is there a war going on right now that's a long war that's making both sides weak? Sure, Russia and Ukraine. Now, I don't have an opinion on either one. I don't like either one of them. But it's weakening both of them. It's killing an entire generation of young men in both of those places. Next. Causes. Many Greek cities resented Athens' domination of the Delinean League, and some revolted against Athens. Sparta and Athens were longtime rivals. Just because they fought together in the Persian Wars does not mean they liked each other. They didn't. Sparta led the Peloponnesian League to oppose the Delinean League. They were both overconfident. Both sides believed they had advantages over the other. Athens at sea, Sparta on land. They were both right. And one would win. They were not both right. So they moved towards war. Now we saw what the Spartans could do yesterday. You'd think that fighting against the Spartans would not be smart, but we also know how good the Athenians were with their strategy, with their equipment, with their leadership. So raise your hand if you're still writing. Okay. Did you find yours? You got your backpack? Open your backpack, son. Next. The Peloponnesian War. Sparta gets jealous of Athens. Sparta and Athens fight over control of Greece. Now, why was it called the Peloponnesian War? Raise your hand if you know. It's because both of these were on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, right? Here's Athens. Here's Sparta, down here. Who's still writing? Okay. Can anybody predict the strategy of either one? Okay. We know that Athens is going to try to control the sea and defeat all of Sparta's allies and then isolate Sparta. Sparta is going to go straight to Athens. Try to capture Athens. So here's the allies. Sparta and her allies, Athens and her allies. So it's kind of all over the place. Next. Power struggle. Athens treated the Delinean League city-states as if they were their empire. They used league funds for projects in the city of Athens. We're going to talk about that next week. Sparta feared Athens was getting too powerful. Next. Economics. Athens stopped Corinth, which is Sparta's ally, from taking over another city-state, and they laid siege to the colony of Corinth. Athens slapped Megara with trade sanctions, which means they could not trade with any allies of Athens, a death blow to their economy. Corinth and Megara convinced Sparta to go to war with Athens. Raise your hand if you're still riding. Next. Athens' strategy. Athens was a naval power. They surrounded Sparta by sea to prevent food and supplies from reaching Sparta's allies. Raise your hand if you remember what that kind of ship was called. Trireme, right? Hand up if you're still riding. Next. So here's the different areas. Okay. Next. Sparta's strategy. Sparta had a strong army. Surround Athens and prevent it from raising food around the city. They did not have a navy until the very end of the war. Raise your hand if you're still riding. You might want to move up here. Next. Stalemate. For much of the war, neither side could gain the upper hand over the other. With a few short periods of peace in between, it lasted 30 years. Raise your hand if you're still riding. Next. Plague. So here's our first instance of the plague. Athens was severely weakened when a plague broke out. It killed 1/3 of their population. Imagine 1 out of every 3 people in the school dying from sickness. It would be terrible. Including Pericles, who was their able leader. Raise your hand if you're still riding. Tell me when you're done. Raise your hand when you're done. Next. The Athenians made a huge mistake in 416 BC. They invaded Sicily, which is Italy, to conquer Sparta's ally, Syracuse. They hoped to destroy the Spartans' food supply, but they were surrounded and annihilated. Who's still right? Next. The war ends. Syracuse weakened the Athenians, but they held out for 10 more years. the Spartans finally conquered Athens in 404. Athens had to give up their navy and their empire. Athens had to follow Spartan foreign policy, and they had to end their democracy. Does anybody notice what Sparta did not do to Athens? Raise your hand. They didn't destroy it. They didn't destroy the city. Who's still writing? Next. No, you're still writing. That's okay. Thucydides, father of scientific history, because of the standards of evidence collecting, he writes a history of the Peloponnesian War. Is that on there? Is that on your notes? Next. The aftermath. Athens was the strongest, although Sparta was victorious. And after the war, much of Greece lay in ruin. Greece was severely weakened economically and militarily. Greek culture slowed. Athens and Sparta declined, and no one realized that the city-state of Macedonia in northern Greece was gaining power. You don't have to lean over me. Move over there, or sit right there. Oh, super glad that's going to be on the video. So when the war lasted so long, it lasted 30 years, and it just decimated the two superpowers of the region. It left them weakened for someone else to come in and take power. As a matter of fact, Sparta was only in charge for a few years until another city-state took over for them. At one point in the war, the Spartans surrendered. At one of the battles, the Spartans surrendered. We haven't heard anything about that. So it just weakened a whole generation of mainland Greece, and then those guys from the north are going to come in and they're going to take over. The Peloponnesian War, the results. The war had resulted in deaths of many of their citizens. Orchards, vineyards, and fields, food supplies had been destroyed. The treasuries of the city-states had been destroyed, and faith in democracy had been reduced. As a result of the Peloponnesian War, Greece became weaker and poorer. By 338 BC, led by Philip II, the Macedonians conquered all of Greece. And they finally all united because they were all too weak to resist the Macedonians. And the Macedonians, that's that flag. The blue one. Who's still riding? Okay. Next. A recap. Go ahead and answer these questions. Raise your hand if you know which two city-states were the main two enemies. Athens and Sparta. Athens had a strong navy. Sparta had a strong army. What killed 1/3 of the Athenians? Plague, right? Who won the Peloponnesian Wars? 1 for Athens, 2 for Sparta. 2 Spartans. Which Greek city-states were weakened by the wars? 1 for Athens, 2 for Sparta, 3 for both, 4 for all of them. It's 4, it's all of them. All right. As we say in my class, go forth and learn because knowledge is power.